The Legend of Zelda is one of the most important and innovative franchises in Nintendo's history. From its humble beginnings, the original game set the wheels in motion for the series and influenced the future design of thousands upon thousands of video games in the process. Today, the iconic Zelda is a household name, but back when the first title splashed onto the screen, where this game was going was shrouded in mystery and uncertainty, even for Nintendo. This meant that throughout this legendary original game's developmental process, the title underwent numerous transformations and substantial changes would be made over and over again, thus meaning that many of the original ideas that were conceived for this title would never see the light of day. Over the years, this has led to the likes of this mysterious screenshot existing, illustrating to us that at one point, Zelda was shaping up to be a different game completely. Bearing this in mind, join me today as we explore links to our past and learn everything there is to know about Zelda's first prototype. I am Lady Decade, and this is the lost, completely different version of The Legend of Zelda from 1985. The original Legend of Zelda, released in 1986 for the Nintendo Entertainment System, was absolutely incredible. It was a game changer in every sense of the word, introducing players to an expansive open world filled with secrets, challenging puzzles and epic battles. The game's protagonist Link embarked on an exciting quest to rescue Princess Zelda and defeat the evil bastard known as Ganon. This narrative framework would become the signature cornerstone of the series that we all know and love, with it all starting with this humble 8-bit entry. The gameplay and exploratory nature of this one made Zelda a video game unlike any other, and its non-open world and non-linear style of progression made this title feel more like a real adventure than any title that has come before it. When traversing the mysterious world of Hyrule for the first time, players famously had to find and conquer 8 dungeons in order to collect pieces of the Triforce. The freedom to explore and tackle these dungeons in various orders functioned as a major factor in this game's allure. The originality of this title would of course result in strong sales. The Legend of Zelda was a massive hit, and by the end of its first year it had sold over 1 million copies, eventually reaching over 6.5 million copies worldwide. These impressive numbers not only solidified the game's success, but also established the Zelda franchise as an essential part of Nintendo's primary lineup, with regular new entries produced in the series right up until this very day. I don't know about you, but I love the classic Zelda games, the NES originals, the 16-bit Link to the Past, and the iconic Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, the Game Boy's Link's Awakening, and the GBA's Minish Cap. So much goodness! What's awesome today is that all of these games and many more can be enjoyed on Nintendo Switch Online. I can sort you out with a 12-month membership as well as the expansion pack, granting you access to Nintendo 64 and Sega Mega Drive games for an entire 19% cheaper than from Nintendo by simply using my affiliate link via the pinned comments. But great deals don't just stop there, as my link can get you as much as up to 90% off thousands of other titles across every piece of modern hardware. Every sale supports this channel and gets you amazing bargains, so happy shopping. Thanks to Instant Gaming for sponsoring this video. Mechanics, which first appeared in the original Legend of Zelda, can now be witnessed all over gaming, with many of its principles becoming standard in the industry. You want save files in your console game? Well, Zelda was the first game to include those, rather than relying on rudimentary passwords, a groundbreaking feature for the time. Then, of course, we have that succulent open world, intricate dungeon designs, and emphasis on discovery and experimentation. Key elements now included in so many games today, but it was Zelda which brought many of these ideas to the forefront. But as important and amazing as all of these layers are to this timeless classic, what I find just as interesting is the existence of this game in its earlier phases and what the title was like back in its mysterious early prototype phase. Piecing bits of history together from what we can tell at least, the production of The Legend of Zelda we all know and love was no easy process. And before this title became a legendary milestone in gaming history, its journey to release was far from straightforward. In fact, during its developmental cycle, the game intricately underwent numerous transformations, with many original and ambitious ideas never making it to the final product. So let's attempt to look beyond the fog and into this game's murky beginnings. This brings us to an intriguing discovery revealed in an Iwata Asks interview, which can be found on Nintendo.com, where key figures from Nintendo reminisced about the game's early days. The interview, which was primarily about The Legend of Zelda Spirit Tracks, includes some very important faces from the Nintendo staff who worked on the original game and were surprised with some old documents from 1985 showcasing some of their early conceptual work, which seemed to bring out a lot of good memories and nostalgia from this legendary team. These documents, bearing Shigeru Miyamoto's personal seal, certainly related to The Legend of Zelda, but described a game that was markedly different from the one that eventually graced our screens in 1986. The docs referred to this early conceptual game simply as Adventure, a very basic title that hinted at the game's early conceptual phase. One of the many fascinating revelations that can be found within the interview was that the game's initial working title was Adventure Mario. Takeshi Tezuka, one of the legends present in the interview, clarifies he believes the title was written on the file binding specifications. In an interesting twist, this indicates to us that Zelda wasn't always envisioned as its own unique entity. It shared some conceptual DNA with the Mario series. Moreover, Toshihiko Nakago, Nintendo's current representative director and president of systems research and development and former programmer for The Legend of Zelda, pointed out that the early notes included ideas for items like compasses, bows and arrows, boomerangs and gold and silver, as well as enemies that would eventually morph into the iconic characters like Ganon, initially referred to as Hakai, a reference to a pig-like character from the Chinese novel Ji. In this sit-down interview looking at these mysterious documents, Eiji Aonuma, the famous producer of The Legend of Zelda, remarked, "It certainly does have the appearance of a source text. Without a doubt, this is where it all started." During this reminiscing, the team even looked at the first land map for Zelda, illustrating the collaborative process between Tezuka and Miyamoto, who worked side by side to craft the game's world. The map revealed early design elements like the Lost Woods and demonstrated how the game was initially visualized. As discussed in this video earlier, while these early concepts are still floating around today, not everything made it into the final game. As Nakago further pointed out, "We drew materials from this for quite some time afterward," suggesting that many of these ideas influenced future Zelda games. The game evolved considerably from these early sketches, yet these documents provide a rare glimpse into the creative process behind one of gaming's most beloved franchises. It definitely brought back a lot of good memories too for the people in the room. However, old design documents are one thing, what about existing evidence regarding early footage of the game? This brings us nicely to this screenshot, which looks extraordinarily similar to one of the design images shown by Nakago during the Iwata Asks interview. As you can see, there is a clear resemblance between the two images, which suggests that this part at least managed to get programmed before being cut. This image of this super old build first surfaced to the public within the Hyrule Encyclopedia released in Japan, and linking this image back to design documents and the sit-down interview, it seems we can learn more about it. Regarding the hand-drawn version of this image, Nakago commented, "We talked about how the first The Legend of Zelda only had dungeons. This is the planning sheet for the dungeon select screen we drew up back then. The title is Adventure Title, so we hadn't decided on The Legend of Zelda yet." That's right, before the official birth of what would go on to become one of the most important video games of all time, back in its earlier development phases, it wasn't always intended to include some of the key features that helped make it so memorable and impactful in the first place. Can you imagine an alternative universe where rather than The Legend of Zelda, we would instead be delivered a very different game? A title with no immersive open world to explore, but rather a game that simply involves exploring the dungeons that can be accessed with a menu. This certainly sounds fun enough, but back then this clearly wasn't the Zelda we would become familiar with. This premise, though, was simply not enough for Miyamoto. A very old GameSpot article reported that Miyamoto wanted to take the idea of a game world even further. In his words, the intent of the original Zelda game, and every Zelda title since, was to give players a miniature garden that they can put inside their drawer. His inspiration came from the fields, woods and caves outside Kyoto that he had explored as a boy, and he has always tried to impart this sense of exploration and limitless wonder to players through his Zelda titles. He once stated, "When I was a child, I went hiking and found a lake. It was quite a surprise to me to stumble upon it. When I travelled around the country without a map, trying to find my way, stumbling on amazing things as I went, I realised how it felt to go on an adventure like this." ShmupLations.com provides us with short interview notes from Shigeru Miyamoto taken from the Legend of Zelda Sound and Drama CD released in 1994. He adds that a lot of features that made it into the final game revolved around taking advantage of the new Famicom Disk System hardware. Miyamoto further adds, "We were brimming with new ideas on how to fully utilise the disk system's new capabilities. A name entry system using better music, recording the player's progress, and so forth. In that sense, it was a very fun game to create. The flip side of doing something new, however, is that Zelda was a game where we were very concerned whether players would understand what they were supposed to do, much like the fear Nakamura had when Dragon Quest was first released. And once we decided there'd be riddles and puzzles in Zelda, that carried a lot of anxiety with it as well. Some of the puzzles are quite difficult to solve after all. Since we were working on a Super Mario at the same time, once Mario was finished, we grabbed the Mario programmers and used them for Zelda in a final programming sprint. That was really tough. As for the ideas for the final premise of the game, an everyday boy gets drawn into a series of incredible events and grows to become a hero. Within that framework, I wanted to create a game where the player could experience the feeling of exploration as he travels about the world, becoming familiar with the history of the land and the natural world he inhabits. That is reflected in the title, The Legend of Zelda. Adventure games and RPGs are games where you advance through the story through dialogue alone, but we wanted players to actually experience the physical sensation of using a controller and moving the character through the world. We wanted dungeons to be explorable with a simple mapping system. These and similar ideas were what we wanted to experiment with in Zelda. So, bearing this in mind, a game that simply included dungeons and a menu doesn't fall in line with the final concept whatsoever. Many years later, during an interview with a Superplay from 2003, Miyamoto would add that, "For me, it has always been important that the gamers grow together with Link, that there is a strong relationship between the one who holds the controller and the person who is on the screen. I have always tried to create the feeling that you really are in Hyrule. If you don't feel that way, it will lose some of its magic." None of this came easy though, so it's no wonder that a dungeon-only build of the game was once in the works. In 2007 at the Game Developers Conference, Miyamoto revealed that when they were originally testing the game in Japan, many players were confused and had trouble finding their way through the multi-path dungeons. And in initial game designs, the player would start with the sword already in their inventory. Rather than merely simplifying matters for players, Miyamoto forced the player to listen to the old man who gave the player their sword and encouraged interaction among people to share their ideas with each other to find the various hidden secrets, a new form of gaming communication. When we look back at what a challenging concept an open world game like this was to implement right, it's no surprise that a development stage once existed where Zelda was simply dungeons accessible via a menu. However, without that big open world and the special link created between us and the playable character, we would never have had the Zelda we all know and love so much. Don't forget, I can get you a huge discount on the Nintendo Switch Online service, giving you access to loads of classic Zelda goodness, or if you are looking for something else cheap, up to 90% off thousands of games that can be enjoyed using my affiliate link. Every purchase supports my work. Or if you want to access my cosplay library and want to back what I do in a more personal way, then please consider backing the show on Patreon. See you soon.